FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome, and you are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's December 19th, 2017. Hey, as always, be part of the show. Love to get your emails. Going to have a hotline number, too, where you can call us and leave messages that we'll play back on the show. The email address is kl@kerrylutz.com. Twitter feed's @KerryLutz. So, read a really fascinating article in one of my favorite sites, zerohedge.com, entitled A Gold Guy's View of Crypto, Bitcoin, and Blockchain. And unlike so many of the articles that I've read, not emotional, a really armchair analysis of what's taking place in the marketplace. It was authored by Alan Stanczyk, and your background, you're managing director of Physical Gold Fund. So we assume that has something to do with precious metals. And hey, you've done a lot in the financial sector. You're designer and advisor to the world's first non-bank private custody compliant precious metals fund, the Luxembourg Precious Metals Fund. So you're somebody who knows what's going on in the space, not just from the standpoint of, watching prices on the screen, but actually how the nuts and bolts of the market work. So, questions, got plenty of them, but the cryptocurrencies, boom, bust, bubble, what is it? A bubble or what? And Alex, welcome to the show here. It's great to have you on.
Thanks a lot, Kerry. Thanks for having me.
So are we looking at a bubble? Are we looking at a market that's going to go exponential and go up forever?
Well, I assume you're talking about the Bitcoin / sort of cryptocurrency markets.
Right.
And I don't really hold myself out as any kind of an expert to be able to predict those kind of things. I try to stay away from predictions, particularly where it comes to U.S. dollar, crosses against currencies or gold, et cetera, that type of thing. But I did sort of take a really good look at the space. Obviously, there's a ton of buzz going on in regards to cryptocurrencies. It went from basically nothing, starting back in 2009 to the very beginning of this year. It started passing $1,000 an ounce. At one point, one Bitcoin passed, in U.S. dollar terms, passed what 1 troy ounce of gold was worth. And then sort of Bitcoin advocates started coming out of the woodwork, saying, is Bitcoin the new gold, or claiming that Bitcoin is the new gold, et cetera. And so that, it got my attention. It was on my radar, and I started looking into it. And it obviously, everybody knows, it's kind of gone from there up to, I think, as high as 19 some odd thousand in intraday trading this year, just a couple of weeks ago. And so my background is, I was, before being in the physical gold industry, which we can talk more about it if you want. But I was in the IT industry for 16 years. I was ultimately the director of IT for the largest aerospace union in the United States, managed wide area networks, data centers, et cetera. And so I've got a little bit of a tech background. I don't claim to be a cryptographer, but I get it. I get the underlying technology, what they're trying to do. And then sort of my views are through the lens of a person who's studied monetary history, because I'm involved in physical gold and have been for a decade. I've done a lot of studying to understand what money really is. I thought I knew what it was. I think everybody thinks they know what it is, and nobody really thinks about it. So money's kind of like air, right? As long as we have enough of it and it's just there, nobody really, you don't think about sitting there breathing all day long. And money's the same way. As long as it's working and doing what you want it to do, then nobody really cares and nobody pays a lot of attention to it. But as soon as it starts to break down, as soon as you start sort of having your air cut off, like if I were to stand on your chest, Gary, or and choke off your air, you'd immediately become concerned about that. And that's sort of what's happening with people's money. Over time, because of the way our monetary system is constructed, the effect of it is that over time, it's slowly sort of choking the financial life out of people. When you combine all of the different factors of taxation, the cost of medical care, the interest rates on all the debt. And then inflation. Inflation is sort of the insidious thing that's part of our monetary system that wasn't there in the beginning. A lot of people don't know this, but when the United States, you and I talked about this a little while ago, Kerry, is that when the United States was first designed, the framers of the Constitution specified that our money had to be gold and silver coin. It wasn't left up for debate. It wasn't like theory, and they did that for a reason. The reason that they did is they wanted to make sure that the government didn't have the ability to basically go into huge amounts of debt and basically create money out of thin air to pay for what they were not capable of fiscally managing. So governments, and they knew this because going back for hundreds and hundreds of years, they studied history too. They saw what happened when governments want to go to war and they can't afford it. The easiest thing for them to do is go off of the gold standard and then just start printing money. And that's how they finance it. They go into debt.
Of course, we've seen that with the Bank of England. That's why the Bank of England was created, to finance the wars of the monarchy. And we also saw that with the South Sea Company, they got their monopoly on trade with South America by agreeing to pay off England's war debt. So all sorts of nefarious things happen there.
Sure. And your listeners may be familiar with the name Rothschild. So there's a guy by the name of Amschel Myers Rothschild, who was the patriarch of the Rothschild banking family. And one of his famous quotes is that there is no better customer than nations at war. Mm-hmm. And so it tells you something about that. But getting back to the idea of the money, when you have a monetary system designed the way we do, and I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds in it, but the bottom line is when you have a 1 or 2 or 3% annual rate of inflation, the compounding effect of that, and I encourage all of you to sort of get on YouTube, look up compounding, understand how it works, and it's because of the math of the way it works that you're mathematically, if your money is inflating on a percentage term every single year, mathematically, it is doomed to failure because it will continue to lose buying power over time. Since the Federal Reserve was created back in 1913, the U.S. dollar has lost over 97% of its buying power. I can remember when I was a kid, and this was in my article, I used to go to the movies. It used to cost us $1.50 to buy a movie ticket. And I'm probably dating myself here, but I don't really care because the point is I just bought tickets to Star Wars The Last Jedi, and they were $20 a piece.
Hey, I have you a few years on you. I can remember when a matinee movie ticket was 25 cents, 50 cents. My mother'd give me a buck, and I couldn't even spend all the money. Now, you bring, if you just go yourself, like I know Star Wars was $40, but luckily the person I was with had a senior citizen discount, so we got it for $20 for the two of us. But then,
oh my gosh,
but that's where the fun begins, because it used to be the ticket was the profit center for the theater. Now the concession is where they make the money, and they really hose you $5 for a 50-cent bottle of water and $7 for a tub of popcorn that cost them 25 cents. But yeah, the concept is that the basically the purchasing power of the dollar really going down the tubes here, and that's why they're created, right? These central banks to manage gradual inflation or debasement of the currency. Sometimes it's not so gradual, though.
Sure, it's more complicated than that, but the end result for the American people is that it's erosion of buying power, and it's kind of like the frog in a pot of boiling water. You turn it up just a tiny bit at a time, tiny bit at a time, tiny bit at a time. The frog never jumps out because he doesn't know he's being boiled alive, and that's sort of the way inflation works. Is such a tiny increment over time, but it's getting to the point where I think people realize, it used to be that. The generation prior to mine, you could have one working parent in a household, and they had a house, they had a sometimes a vacation cottage somewhere, and an RV, a boat, all those kind of things. Where as nowadays, the typical family unit, the traditional family unit, you could have two parents working, sometimes two jobs, and still don't have the same kind of standard of living as the generation that came before. And so it's just an indication of the direction that it's all going. But it brings us back to the original question about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is that part of the reason that a big part of the reason that it even exists is as an alternate form of sort of money to our current monetary system, which is in the process of breaking as we speak. So,
yes.
And it's a slow. One of my partners calls it, it's the slowest train wreck in history because it happens over a very long period of time.
It really is. And such a great point. The search for an alternative monetary system that can't be debased, and maybe we have it with cryptocurrencies. Look, what's the maximum issuance of Bitcoin? 21 million coins, 17 million already been issued, 4 million have been lost. That's something that the Bitcoin proponents never really like to talk about, but it's easy to lose the stuff which goes to ease of use, which goes to adoption or adoptability. And, that was a concern. So basically what we were talking about pre-call is that all of the technical barriers that exist for cryptocurrencies will definitely be overcome. So there's nothing technical that is going to stop Bitcoin from becoming a regular transactional currency. There's nothing technical, but it's when the government gets its nose under the tent that things start to happen. And I always, you've been listening to this show, you've heard me say it a million times, possession with intent to distribute Bitcoin. Hey, nobody thought gold would be made illegal, although I don't know that possession was really a criminal offense, but certainly trying to transact in it probably would have been. A lot of things, I guess, Alex, have been made illegal during the course of our lifetimes that nobody in their right mind ever thought would be made illegal, right?
Sure. And, I've heard this sort of discussion in regards to crypto quite a bit, where advocates of cryptocurrency will say things like, well, they tried to make peer-to-peer file sharing illegal. These are things like Napster, et cetera, and that didn't work. And they tried to make alcohol illegal, and that didn't work. And drugs, people still take drugs, and their point is that they're basically saying that the government can't stop it. And what I would say to that is, first of all, none of those things were a direct threat to the sovereign power of a government. And so I would caution people to be really careful about underestimating what the government's willing to do, the lengths that the government's willing to go to in order to retain power over the money that we use. Because by maintaining power over the money that we use, specifically through the banking system, they have control of the financial lives, basically, of billions of people. And I don't think that they're going to give that up easily. I don't think they're going to take that lying down. I think that they're going to. It is my opinion that the government, once they, or I should say, not the government. Let me be more specific about that. Politicians, once they figure out the threat that cryptocurrency represents to their power base, they'll do everything they can to destroy it, not just make it illegal.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I happen to know a friend of a friend, but this is a real friend of a friend who is high ranking in the Federal Reserve in Boston, who's actually in charge of finding out all the crypto stuff. And for the first 2-3 years of his job, he's like in the technology area, he couldn't even get them to pay any attention to it. They had no concept what it was worth, anything. And now all of a sudden they're getting a lot more interested, and he's talking to European central banks. There's a lot going on now, and it's gotten their attention. Of that, you can be certain. And when is it going to be a threat to them, though? At what point does it become? Does it switch from being a novelty to a threat to the ongoing order, financial order, or social order of the country and the world?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. It's kind of impossible to say, but if we look at it as a technology adoption, which is basically what it is, right? So it's money. I will say that Bitcoin is money. Cryptocurrency is money. Basically, money is anything that any human beings agree will retain future value and that they're willing to trade, goods or services for, right? And that doesn't matter. You go back all through history. It doesn't matter whether that was seashells or feathers or pieces of wood or giant stone 4-ton wheels. of stone. The thing that made those things money is this, the intrinsic value arguments. It has been sort of discredited for quite a long time. This idea that money has to have some kind of intrinsic value. You look at a U.S. dollar bill. What's the intrinsic value of that? Yeah. I mean, it's really like, think about it. Does it have any intrinsic value at all? It doesn't. What it has is it has you and I agree that it's probably got some value to it, and that's all there is to it. People have to agree. So
confidence. It's all confidence.
Yeah, confidence. It's all about confidence, right? And every central banker in the world who runs any monetary system for a country knows that. And so, as far as how fast it can be adopted, if you think about how technology gets adopted in waves, there's the early adopters, kind of the bleeding edge people who are doing it. Nobody understands what they're doing, right? They're the only people doing it, and they're kind of mad scientists, and they're just the only ones doing it. And then it slowly reaches more and more adoption. And if the technology has merit, that is, it serves a real purpose that people find useful and they're using it, then slowly over time, that reaches a critical mass. And then once it reaches critical mass, you pretty much can't stop it. And that critical mass is typically around 10% of the population. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at, you could look at I've seen charts of this where you can see adoption of cars, and then it goes to adoptions of TVs, and then telephones, and then computers, and then cell phones, and the rate of adoption accelerates to shorter and shorter spans of time. So it could happen very quickly. And, the question really is, are governments really even prepared to deal with this? Or central bankers are starting to talk about it now. If you look around the world, they're starting to make comments on it. And so it's on their radar. They're fully aware of it. The regulators are fully aware of it. But we've used the term government quite a bit, which is like this sort of ambiguous, amorphous, who is it kind of thing. And the reality is most of government is really kind of benign. It's just an apparatus that's in place that sort of carries out and executes the will of the legislature. And I would say that as soon as politicians truly figure it out, that's where it's going to come from. That's when you're going to start to see the government apparatus shift into gear. Where right now, you've got guys. I believe it was the chairman of the SEC weighed in. So did the chairman of the CFTC. And they're both basically taking a pretty neutral stance on Bitcoin. They're basically saying, well, we'll regulate it as it falls into our purview. But I mean, they're not saying it's a good or a bad thing. Watch that tone change drastically if politicians start to take a negative view on it. It will be associated more and more with criminal activity.
Money laundering. Money laundering, right? That's always the excuse.
Yeah, the typical things that are used today are money laundering, criminal activity, illicit activity, drugs, pornography, human trafficking, the financing of terrorism. It will be demonized and associated with that more and more and more, which will then be used to write legislature that makes it legal, which will then be used to, basically attack the ecosystem. Now, I'm not saying that's a guaranteed thing. I'm not sitting here doom and glooming that. I'm not saying prophesizing that's what's going to happen. What I'm saying is what's at stake here is control of the financial lives of billions. And at the end of the day, government costs a lot of money to run, and politicians love to spend more money than they collect. Yeah. And, I don't see that changing. I don't see them voluntarily willing to change that. I think it's going to have to be forced upon the system.
Oh, agreed, for sure. So that's kind of what we have to look forward to. Let's just go back to a barbarous relic, often called gold. And where is gold's place in the world now? With cryptocurrencies ever going higher, gold's kind of caught in this sideways channel of roughly $12.50 plus or minus $50. It's been there for like a couple of years now, it seems. Is gold gonna be like the proverbial dog having its day, or why? I guess I should say, if cryptocurrencies are going like gangbusters, like they are, why is gold still stuck in the dumps here?
So it's interesting the way you frame that, because what you're basically saying when you say stuck in the dumps, you're saying in U.S. dollar terms, and like. Gold's sort of never gone away. It's a lot of people look at gold, or they look at anything, and they're using the dollar as the measuring stick. And So to me, the thing to understand about gold, number one, is that all of it's owned. It's not like people are trying to get rid of it. There's 185,000-ish tons above ground of gold that we know of. And somebody owns all of it. So this idea that, you have to try to find somebody to sell it to, et cetera, is simply not true. I mean, it's highly valued by billions of people on the planet. In places like India and China, it's not looked at like in the West. Over there, they consider it basically money. You buy jewelry, that is like wealth. It's wealth that you wear, because a lot of them don't trust the banking system and they don't trust the government. Why? Because they've learned the hard way that they probably shouldn't. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to, will gold have its day and things like that, that's kind of sort of implying that it needs to go up a lot in US dollar terms. And see, to me, if gold is going sideways right now, what that means is that there's this sort of tug of war with global capital, sort of determining whether the US dollar is rising or falling in purchasing power relative to other currencies. Mm-hmm. So when you see gold going sideways, that means there's this tug of war that the US dollar purchasing power relative to other currencies in the world is kind of going sideways right now.
Right.
When you see the US dollar price of gold going up, that means the US dollar is getting weaker on the global stage.
Correct.
Okay. So to me, gold is sort of just a way to store wealth that is, and I said this in my article, is that the difference between gold and Bitcoin, all these people keep coming out going, well, Bitcoin's a new gold. Here's the thing. I'm not dissing on Bitcoin one bit. I love it. I love cryptocurrency. I think it's awesome. I hope it succeeds. There are challenges with it, real challenges that I think need to be addressed. But cryptocurrency is not gold and can never be gold. Mm. And the reason is simple, and it lies in physics. This is the utility value of gold. You can't destroy it. Full stop.
Right.
All right.
Totally
gold exists as an element on the periodic table that is basically indestructible. You can destroy things like computers, phones, internets, power grids, nations. You could blow up the planet Earth, but the gold atoms would still be there, and that is the point. You can't destroy it. In order to destroy gold, you would literally have to fire it into the sun or stick it in the center of some kind of fusion reaction that would take the gold apart at a subatomic level. You can't destroy it. Yeah. And because of that, it's kind of like a battery with no expiration date. You can store value in it forever, and that is the reason why humans collectively over thousands of years have chosen to use gold as sort of a storehouse of wealth, and that's never changed.
Right. Yeah. What you're referring to is often called durability. So like your paper money eventually is going to disintegrate, but your gold, gold, one of the properties of gold is that it never oxidizes, unlike silver, which does oxidize, which means over 1 million years, a lump of silver could conceivably disappear if the oxidation process is accelerated, but gold doesn't interact with anything. There's no oxidation. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's a huge difference. And that's why they're still digging up Spanish galleons with millions or hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gold to this day that sank 400, 500 years ago. And I don't think they'll be mining for Bitcoin in 500 years. I just have that feeling,
Sure. Well, I mean, you never know. I'm not going to make a prediction on the future, but here's another thing that's pretty important to understand is that what makes gold unique as opposed to Bitcoin or really anything else. If you think about money, right? Money is basically a store of our labor. We work hard, right? Everybody has whatever it is they do. They have a business or they have a job. They're producing something. They're producing energy. They put in their own personal energy, and then they produce some kind of good or service, which then, we can store either in money or we can invest it. But here's an important thought is that if you look at every type of thing you can store money in, they're all subject to what I call financial entropy. And what that means is that they require human energy and force of will to maintain. Gold requires nothing to maintain. It is the only thing like that. If you think about, for example, stocks, equities, companies, fiat currencies issued by government, bonds, real estate, if you've got a house, you have to maintain it. Bitcoin requires, for example, power grids, internet, computers, developers, miners, anything, literally anything you can store or invest money in the world today will slowly, if you just leave it alone, if humans walked away from it, it would self-destruct over time. And gold is the only thing on the entire planet Earth that doesn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the reason why cryptocurrency can't replace it. It's always been used as a store of wealth that is immune to government interference. It's immune to the forces of nature. That's right out of the Bible, where it can't be destroyed by time. And that, I think, is the primary difference. Is there a place for things like cryptocurrency? I believe so, absolutely. I think that I am a big believer in a distributed or a decentralized sort of public ledger technology where you don't need banks anymore. That's basically what it comes down to. It disintermediates the banks. And what people don't realize is the banks are what politicians use to control their financial lives. If you look at how the system works, so it allows people to interact directly one with each other, and takes that whole sort of piece out of the loop. And that sounds like a really great idea to me if it works.
Yeah, if it works, and that's something we're going to have to leave and just observe, see what happens. Alex, if we want to find out more about you, read your work, where's the best place to find you?
Well, my business is physicalgoldfund.com, physicalgoldfund.com. And you can also look at my personal site at alexstanczyk.com. I'm on Twitter at Alex Stanczyk, and my last name is Stanczyk. All
right, Alex, and we'll have a link to your site, the show notes in this interview, as we always do. You want to send an email to Alex, myself, get involved in the show, it's kl@kerrylutz.com, Twitter feed's at Kerry Lutz, and the Facebook page is Financial Survival Network. Alex, thank you so much for joining us. Been a real pleasure. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks for having me.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.